Yes.
I want to say, because you said a lot, and I want to write it down, and I want to go through each of these to the best of my ability.
Sure.
So 1964, Rob, you pulled it up, and I'm glad you said it, because I went and actually looked at Snopes. Go to Snopes, because I wanted to know, did he actually say that, right? Because this is what we found. I won't read it, but the audience can read it. Can you go a little lower where it shows the whole thing? Okay, we can just show that at the top, and then we'll read the whole thing. Okay, right here. You can do that right there. These boom, that's right. They're getting pretty uppity these days, and that's a problem for us. They've got something now they've never had before, the political pull to back up their uppityness. Now we've got to do something about this, and we've got to give them a little something, just enough to quiet them down, not enough to make a difference. And then boom, you know that line, you brought it up. I'll have him voting this way, Democratic, for the next 200 years. Yes. You know what Snopes said? Snopes didn't say it's not right. Go a little bit more. It says unproven. And Snopes is one that would typically be quick to say they never said this. Then CNBC writes an article, if you can pull this one up. CNBC writes an article saying Lyndon Johnson was a civil rights hero, but also a racist. And if you look at the stuff about him, how many times he dropped the N-word and all this other stuff, this guy was not wanting to do what he did with civil rights. No. Credit goes to one man and the community that pushed it. There's a reason why we all have a poster or painting of him in our offices and our walls, and he's admired by everybody. It doesn't matter, left, right, center, white, black, Asian, Hispanic. Everybody loves and admires what this man did. One of the greatest movements of all time. He accomplished it in a peaceful way, different than X. He was able to get it done, right? Okay. At that time, can you type in Civil Rights March? Just type in Civil Rights March, if you don't mind doing that. Just type in Civil Rights March and go to images, if you could do that. When you type in civil rights, click on that first picture. What do you see a lot of? Look at the way they're dressed. Yeah. Just look at the way, go to the bottom left picture, maybe that's got more people in suits. Bottom left.
Bottom left.
Look at the ties. Look at the suits.
Tuxedos.
Look at the tuxedos. Look at the bow ties. Wow. Pure class on the way it's being dressed. So Lyndon Johnson, War on Poverty, 1964. Do you know at the time, can you look up when Planned Parenthood came out? Maybe you can look at, I don't know the exact year. When did Planned Parenthood come out?
I think it was 71, 72.
70, what year is it? Go a little bit, Singer, whatever her name is, where he started the movement. Anyways, so you look at some of this data, and you see that we went at the time when kids are being born, only 4% of kids in America, if you can pull up the stat, Rob, 4% of kids in America were born, in single-family household. 96%, mom and dad.
Yeah.
Fast forward, we went from 4% to 41%. And by the way, it's even higher for African Americans. This is America. This is not African Americans. Percentage of children born out of wedlock, but African American is to the roof. That wasn't the case. You guys were always united, conservative. It's a good community, respectful, Bible Belt. Right. When I was in the Army, and my friends in the Army I was hanging out, when I would go see their families, I was afraid of their mothers. No, seriously. Right. Your mother would have talked to me like I'm her son. Right. And she would put me in my place. It was a different kind of a culture. Right. That was what I was accustomed to, right? So to me, when they say systemic racism, if you want to give anybody credit, it's Lyndon Johnson, and he succeeded in actually trying to create that kind of an environment. And the reason why he was very creative on the way he did it is he blamed the other side for it and got them, the blacks, to vote Democratic for God knows how many decades until now, where things are slightly changing. And I'll wrap up the thoughts here, and I want to get your.
But can I respond to what you just said?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that. When you mention all of those things, first of all, you said nothing that I can dispute. Nothing. Because that's just factually correct, what you pointed out. And I think that the important thing to bring up when we bring that stuff up is that is exactly the reason why black folks in America have historically over the last 50 plus years had that divide with the Republican Party. Stay with me. What happened is, Patrick, you invite me onto this show and you talk to me. We're having this conversation. You show me facts. I leave this office. I give you no resistance. And then you turn on the TV and I'm like, Patrick Bet-Davis full of it. Look what he brought up. This some racist BS, blah, 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 blah. You'd never want to talk to me again. It's disingenuous. It's not educated. It's not fair. One of the things that we have to pay attention to is that there is a Republican Party that can't disguise its resentment towards Black America because of what you just pointed out. It's just that we're looking at it differently. As this Black person, when I got to know Republicans and I heard my parents speaking about conservatism and stuff like that, I remember asking my mother one day, I said, you know that fact. How would you feel if you know that you contributed to bringing civil rights legislation to the desk of the presidency to sign into law, and that was ignored? Because the party that he represented, he made sure they got all the credit for what you played a role in bringing to the table that helped the African American community, supposedly. And it was completely ignored. You'd lose our respect because you'd believe you're not educated enough. You're putting forth your due diligence to know it wasn't just him, it was us. And his intent wasn't honorable. Ours was. I think that you have a lot of Republicans who are knowledgeable about that history that you just pointed out and the distaste that they have had for African Americans for a period of time at the very least emanates from that, from folks not knowing what role they play. When I listen to a Sean Hannity or Mark Levin and Andrew Wilkow and others talk about Black America's history and racism, they never fail to point out the Democrats played a huge, huge role in this, y'all, and the Black community lets them off the hook. They look at us, and there's a level of absolute frustration, palpable frustration that comes from that. I don't always agree with it, but I understand it, which made it easy for me to communicate with members of the Republican Party when they come to me and they want to talk about different issues, because I'm like, I want to learn more. I want to hear this, because you're not going to come to me and engage in demonization talking about the other side, in this case, the right. You're not doing that. What are your policies? What are you bringing to the table? Don't talk to me about them being racist, because you know what else? You're asking me to assume you're not. How do I know you're not? I know there were KKK members that were members of the Democratic Party that were on Capitol Hill. Robert Byrd of West Virginia, to name one of them. I know that for a fact. And so why are we to assume that just because you're a Democrat, you're on our side? So I do get where you're coming from, and I understand.
Yeah. So to me, that part to me is, you check policies to see how it's benefited a community, and you say yes or no. You have no idea how much my favorite part of this podcast is when you said your mother, when she went on welfare, she was despised of it, and she couldn't wait to get off of it. Right. I can't tell you what that means to me, to salute and respect that. And then let's go to a couple other things you said on who you would vote for and who you wouldn't vote for. You said John Kasich. He was a centrist. I think he was an independent. I don't think he was a Republican, but I think he was
centrist.
I think he was a nice guy. I think John Kasich was a nice guy.
He was a Republican governor.
He was. Yeah, he was.
Ohio.
Yeah,
yes.
He was a nice guy. I think Christie, he's a fighter. I actually enjoy listening to Christie.
He's a friend,
I think he's a little bit, I'm aware. Yeah, and I was a little bit like, I think, I have some friends that were, part of Trump's camp. He fired him. And then there's a bitterness, and, that's between them. I just watch it and say, you're not going to win being a bitter candidate. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to win that way. And, maybe that was it. It wasn't. It is what it is. Nikki Haley. So, for me, when I wasn't into politics, and I was purely business guy, like, I don't have time for this stuff, man.
Right.
I'm just going to go to business, make my money. My dad's going to retire 99 cents.
That's a lot of people in this world.
Yeah,
That's
I have zero desire for politics, right?
Yeah.
And then the bigger I got, I'm like, oh, you kind of got to study a little bit of politics on what's going on, right? Because why would I want to study politics? The taxes you pay is politics, right? The policies in your community is politics. Homelessness is politics.
Yes.
The war that happened that wasn't safe is politics. All that stuff is, okay, I got to pay attention to it. So a Nikki Haley, very eloquent, incredible speaker, tough, strong, good background, all of that. So now we're dealing with left right, and then you have the anti-establishment, and the establishment.
Okay.
The anti-establishment is not Republican, like Kennedy's were anti-establishment. Okay. Reagan was semi-anti-establishment. Trump, definitely anti-establishment, right? Lincoln was anti-establishment. These are anti-establishment guys. Establishment is the big families. You see some of the guys that have been president multiple times. That's establishment. When somebody's part of the establishment, they're part of the same party.
Okay.
It's no longer like a left or right. Nikki Haley, to me, is part of the establishment. She's an establishment right. She's going to do what the establishment right's going to do. And in many of the states, she got all the Democratic votes. They were willing to vote for her. Some of the big money guys that are in New York, establishment guys, are willing to give her the money. Let me go back to what you said about Trump on how he handles himself, and then we can have some final thoughts, and we can transition to a different story.
Sure.
I read this book called by Donald T. Phillips, Lincoln on Leadership. And I don't know what chapter it is, 11 or 13. He says, search until you find your Grant. Okay, search until you find your Grant. And he has all these guys that are his generals, Lincoln does. McClellan keeps wanting to train his people. Very proper, very nice, respectful, everything. But are we going to war yet? No, we're just training. We're still preparing. Are we going to war yet? No, are we there? No, man, I'm firing this guy. Bring another guy, and bring another guy, and in this chapter called Search Until You Find Your Grant, if you do anything, buy this book and just read that chapter, whatever the chapter is, Search Until You Find Your Grant. It was written 31 years ago. On Tico's birthday, by the way. It's pretty cool. So, anyways, and then eventually, he gets a hold of a guy named Ulysses S. Grant, who's a drunk, who is getting into bar fights, okay, who he can't get a hold of, who doesn't call Lincoln back. And Lincoln is like, what the hell is the matter with this guy, right? So if we were to judge Grant on the basis of, well, he should be more proper, more eloquent, he should do this, he should do that, guess what? He called him back, whatever the timeline was, 90 days later, hey, the war is done, we won. You're kidding me. No, it's over with. You won. Are you serious? Yeah, we just went. So you weren't spending all these months getting trained? Right. No, everybody's ready. We just went to war, we won.
Right.
Are you serious? Yes. So then what happens is you sit there, it's like bringing it back to the world that, sports, The Last Dance.
Yeah.
Where it's like, one day, I'm in my, Dennis is going through one of his things. Jordan's telling the story. Yeah. You know the story.
I know the story.
And all of a sudden, we're like, he's missing. He's in Vegas, and I go and walk into a room. There's a bunch of naked, and then, she's telling the story. She says, I'm in there naked. I'm like, Michael's in the place. He's like, what the hell is going on? We got you. Get your back, got back to the game. And he says, I just walk out, and then all of a sudden, middle of the night, I'm like, who the hell is knocking on my door at midnight? Opens the door, it's Dennis. He comes and he says, hey, Mike, you got a cigar? He says, yeah. He said, we sit there. We have the cigar. Doesn't say anything. Doesn't say I'm sorry. But from there on, he was locked in because Pippen was playing her to get the contracts back. What did Rodman do? He says, I've never seen Dennis play the way he did, right? Wow. Sometimes the guys to go up against the enemies that are crazy enemies, they're not going to be the types of people that you want them to be. I know you want them to be the types of person that we want. So for us to go up and be able to have an audacity to go to North Korea, to go sit down with Xi, to go sit down with Putin, to go sit down with all these guys, to go up against the establishment, to go up against the people that are using the American government as a way to make their money, how these guys came into politics before they were poor. Afterwards, they end up being richer, while this guy went into politics, was rich. After being president, he lost half his wealth and all that. So you're not going to find someone that's going to look that good. I used to think an insurance agent's got to be somebody that's going to look like, first of all, I don't look like an insurance agent. If you would have seen me day one, I had orange highlights because I would put peroxide in my hair. And I would go to the beach and people are like, why does this guy look like this? And I'm coming in with a tank top.
Middle Eastern surfer.
And then all of a sudden they're like, but this freaking guy is going to go find an agency and sell more policies than anybody else. That's what the market needed. So I can understand the point you're saying to be more presidential, but when you got a fighter, they're not going to look the way we want all the time.
Well, that is a beautiful, eloquent soliloquy you just threw out there. allow me to retort. You know, that was a different time. And it wasn't as chaotic as these times are. You didn't have hundreds of millions of people with their own voice and their own outlets to say what they say and contribute to influencing lives the way that you do today. And when you have somebody that is desensitized to that, and they don't mind the chaos that's going on, I would say, around them as opposed to beneath them, that's something to take into consideration. I'll sit here today and tell you right now, you give a lot of food for thought. And I think that anybody that was gung-ho about, Biden over Trump, listens to what you're saying, I think they should really, really think long and hard about every word that came out of your mouth. Because I don't disagree, and I'm not dismissing your point. I'm just simply trying to attach a level of tangible significance to the fear factor that somebody in that position acting that way has. I don't know if Trump will govern the country or be on a vengeance tour. I don't know whether or not he'll create civil war in this country and not give two damns about it. Because when you are that pissed off, as you said, because he has been such a target for so long, warranted or not, because of his petulance that is flagrant and clear and undeniable, you do have cause to pause for him being in that position. And to somebody get what you want. Listen, John Lewis is an iconic figure, God rest his soul, to a lot of African Americans in this country. Mm-hmm. We saw a Trump that didn't even want to pay tribute or homage to him. And Trump's words, he didn't do nothing for me. He wasn't a supporter of mine. You watch stuff like that, and then you imagine folks on Capitol Hill, real stuff trying to get done, and the personal gets in the way because he didn't like what you said about him or what you did about him or whatever the case may be. When you have that emanating from your leadership, there's a level of disbelief that comes attached to that you can't ignore. Because the Americans say, listen, I'm not one of those guys that's a nationalist per se, but I had no problem with Trump, America first. Man, we got enough. We got billions to throw at Ukraine. Mm-hmm. But you telling me you're going to give $53 million prepaid credit cards in New York City? You know how many black people could have used that? Want to hear that? You know, when you look at Eric Adams and you look at Governor Hochul in New York, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. So when I think about Trump and America first, I'm like, you know, he's the type of person that have been like, wait a minute, Ukraine? What about this right here in our own country? I don't mind that. I appreciate that. But how it will be received a lot of times depends on the individual who's disseminating that message. And if you're a guy that isn't big enough to be above the fray because your responsibility is so much greater, then you're just a petulant individual in a position of power. And do we really want a kid in that seat? Now, we have to consider the alternative. Well, who's going to be there if he's not? And all of those things you pointed out are legit. Inflation, legit. War in Ukraine, legit. When you see some of the things that have been transpiring in our country, the borders, and over 7.2 million illegal immigrants
probably more
have stormed into this country. That's a problem. I am in that. Listen, I don't want anybody starving. I don't want anybody endangered. I wish we could take everybody. Make no mistake about it. But in the end, there are a plethora of other countries throughout this world. You can't invade their borders like that. Can't do it.
So Americans would rather be flattered and lied to and deceived, but be respectful than have a guy that's going to tell you, well,
I think that's an extreme position.
Well, but let me